Good morning and welcome to the second day of the conference. In this session, we will take the problem of religious aspects of Armenian identity. This panel is entitled Religious Limits of Armenian Identity. In this panel, we have three presenters, but two of them are here in person. Christopher Nicole Sheklian will attend this session digitally. He sent us his presentation. Now we will start with Christopher Nicole Sheklian's presentation video, and after that we will continue Arda Melkonyan's presentation. Christopher Nicole Sheklian's presentation has entitled, I don't have the, I don't have the English program, but yeah. Thank you. The Conundrums of Secular Law for Ethno-Religious Identity. Christopher Nicole Sheklian received his BA in Anthropology at University of California, Berkeley. He received his MA degree in University of Chicago, Anthropology. Currently, he is a PhD candidate in the University of Chicago Department of Anthropology.
Good morning. My apologies that I'm not there with you live, but I am glad that I get to participate in this exciting conference in some way. I've titled my paper The Conundrums of Secular Law for Ethno-Religious Identity, and I look forward to getting comments in whatever form they can come. In Yedish's History of Vartan and the Armenian War, we have perhaps the first instance of an assertion that Armenian and Christian are fundamentally linked. This assertion has taken various forms through the years, from the idea that the Apostolic Church provided a unifying institutional force during centuries of statelessness, to the canonization by the Apostolic Church of the 1.5 million killed during the Armenian genocide as martyrs. Following a formulation inserted into the liturgy celebrated in memory of Vartan and his companions by Simeon Yerevansi, the Church now proclaims every April 24th that those 1.5 million died Vasen Havado Yev Vasen Hayrenyats, for faith and for the fatherland. Yet the history of the so-called long 19th century stresses the increasing importance of race and ethnicity, such that the violence of World War I is seen as the culmination of a trend toward articulating group boundaries along racial lines. From the perspective of the historiography of the 20th century, for faith and for the fatherland appears at best a conflation of two different organizing principles for identity, the ethnic and the religious. In what follows, I want to suggest a framework for thinking about this seeming conflation and demonstrate the difficulties it poses for one particular group of Armenians, namely those Armenians living in the Republic of Turkey. For those Armenians, the secular foundations of the Turkish Republic and the legacy of Ottoman institutions forces paradoxical demands for the possibility of collective flourishing. And while Armenians in Turkey leave the apparent conflation of the ethnic with the religious in an acute way, I submit that the same difficulty arises for any attempt to use identity discourse to talk about Armenians. To make this argument, I begin by tracing the history of the so-called millet system in the Ottoman Empire through to its enshrinement in Turkish law by the Treaty of Lausanne. Using ethnographic material gathered during 2 years of fieldwork in Istanbul from 2012 to 2014, the paper follows debates over the role of the Vakif in the Armenian community to highlight how the legal and institutional identification of Armenian as an ethno-religious category sets the parameters for political action. This legal legacy reinforces the identification of Armenian with Christian, making other articulations of Armenian identity difficult. And as long as the project remains one of articulating Armenian identity, this problem remains. I have called the fusion of ethnic and religious categories a seeming conflation because it is only from a particularly modern and secular perspective that such clearly defined categories exist as separable, detachable entities. A major insight of the anthropologist Talal Assad, among other scholars, is that religion as an analytic or even legal category is not timeless. Take, for instance, the various divisions of medieval Christendom. The world was populated by pagans, heathens, infidels, and heretics. From the perspective of the Church of Rome, the Armenian Apostolic Church was not another religion, but rather a heretical form of Christianity. Likewise, the Crusades did not recognize Islam in the same category as Christianity, merely another religion, but saw Muslims as fundamentally errant in their practices and worldview. There was simply no idea that different branches of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, let alone practices further afield, all shared certain fundamental characteristics that identified them as religion. Hence, the possibility that ethnic and religious categories can be conflated assumes the prior possibility of distinguishing them analytically. Following the insights of the anthropology of secularism, it behooves us to search for salient categories rather than assume a universal idea of religion that is separate from ethics, politics, or nation. Indeed, it is a fundamental supposition of the anthropology of secularism that the political doctrine of secularism that organizes the modern nation-state is distinctive not because it insists that church and state should be separate. Indeed, we could say that moments in Armenian history demonstrate times when the ecclesial and political authority were purposefully kept separate, or that religion should be banished from politics, but rather, according to Al-Assad, that secularism presupposes new concepts of religion, ethics, and politics, and new imperatives associated with them. For our purposes, this means that the ability to distinguish between religion and ethnicity at all depends upon a prior secularization. Hence, the idea of a conflation is anachronistic, and we should rather explore salient categories that actually organize life. We have, in the Ottoman idea of millet, just such a category. While I am aware by what Braude calls the foundation myths of the millet system, I define millet in the Ottoman context by the early 19th century as a mode of corporate ecclesial organization for tax purposes. I use ecclesial here in part to avoid the designation of either ethnic or religious. First and foremost, the goal of the millet system was to collect taxes. That it was not purely ethnic is demonstrated by the fact that all non-Chalcedonian Christians, including some that the Armenian Apostolic Church considers apostate, were included in the so-called Armenian millet. The millet system used existing church hierarchies, or in the Jewish case even invented them, for administrative purposes. It is in fact in the changes and fracturing of the Armenian millet in the 19th century that we can identify a process of secularization, a reordering of categories such that something that we can recognize as explicitly religious emerges. It is in Istanbul, more than anywhere, that the category of millet broke down. By the 19th century, there were already a significant number of Armenian speakers who were no longer members of the Armenian Apostolic Church, but who were Catholic or later Protestant. The 19th century has been described as the age of nationalism, and I think that this is in many ways correct. What is lost in the standard story of increased nationalization and the emergence of the idea of the nation, though, is that the nation itself is a fundamentally secular concept. What I mean is that for Armenian to be a purely racial or ethnic category, it has to be re-articulated apart from the church. The flip side of the coin of nationalization is secularization. The fracturing of the Armenian millet along religious lines at exactly the moment of an increased national or ethnic awareness then becomes less of a paradoxical conundrum. For the possibility of an Armenian Catholic millet to emerge in 1831 or an Armenian Protestant millet to emerge in 1850, Armenian has to be conceptually distinct from Armenian Apostolic Christian. Since perhaps Ergüneş wrote his history until that moment in the 19th century, such a censuring was impossible. Of course, the Cilician period had Armenian nobility who were Catholic, but they were also often French-speaking and put on the affectations of the European aristocracy. To many intellectuals in the monasteries of the northeast of Greater Armenia, they had, in fundamental ways, ceased to be Armenian. In the 19th century, though, it was completely possible to be a proud ethnic Armenian, reading the new nationalist literature, and to be a Catholic or a Protestant Christian. This, then, is what I mean when I say that the Millet organization seems to be a conflation. The differentiation of Armenian and Christian was simply not conceptually possible prior to the dual secularization-nationalization that occurred in the 19th century. Where this becomes problematic, and why the Armenian population of Turkey provides special insights into the problem, is when this Ottoman administrative category becomes legally fixed at the foundation of the Republic of Turkey. As is well known, the Treaty of Lausanne provided for the protection of certain fundamental legal rights for minorities which are still in effect today. Moreover, they set the definition of minority in such ways that non-Muslims appear much more in the treaty than any other kind of category. So we'll see that non-Muslim takes a special kind of legal category in the Treaty of Lausanne. As Lerna Ekmekcioglu has recently demonstrated, many of the provisions of the Treaty of Lausanne reiterated the organizational principles of the Millet system. In essence, the conceptual and institutional apparatus of Millet as corporate ecclesial administrative group became cemented into the legal apparatus of the modern Turkish Republic. This conceptual and institutional apparatus has several important features, two of which I will emphasize here. First is the emphasis on the ecclesial hierarchy, where the pyramidal structure of the Armenian Apostolic Church means that the Patriarch of Istanbul, as the chief bishop, sits at the top. As with the Ottoman period, the Patriarch, or in the current situation, the Vicar General, comes to be seen as the representative of all Armenians. Of course, as with the early 19th century, when Istanbul Catholic Armenians found the attempts to reconvert them to the Apostolic Church unbearable, today there are many Armenians who would balk at a clergyman of a particular denomination being seen as representative of all Armenians in the country. Nonetheless, this is one conceptual legacy of the Millet system, where Armenian is simultaneously an ethno-linguistic category and a religious one. While this representative status is conceptual and informal, another Ottoman legal category has a much more solid foundation. This is the vakif, generally translated into English as either foundation or endowment. It has also been attributed a fundamentally religious character in much of the English language literature, but we can easily see that this too is anachronistic. Seeing Surpurgic, a hospital, or the Kalfarian orphanage as essentially religious makes sense only if anything that is designated a vakif is automatically characterized as religious. Indeed, the use of the term to describe the new foundations, or in the name of the Hrant Dink Foundation, makes it clear that attributing a religious character to the term is incorrect. During the period of my ethnographic fieldwork, there was a protracted discussion among Armenians, as well as among other non-Muslim minorities, about how to conceptualize the vakif and what the relationship of individual vakifs to the patriarchate, in the Armenian case, should be. My ethnographic work split time between attending church, serving on the altar around Istanbul, and following the Armenian press. As a deacon in the Armenian Apostolic Church, I encountered the institution of the vakif first and foremost as a church. Yet it was this debate around vakif administration that led me to a more complete understanding of the foundations. One of the central debates during this time was epitomized by a survey and a series of town hall-style meetings organized by a group of intellectuals that were working with the name Düşünce Platform, what I've translated as Opinion Platform. Fortuitously, the first in the series of meetings was in my neighborhood at one of the churches, so I collected my notebook and made my way to the event. It was organized under the heading New Vakif Election Organizing Principles, and took place in one of the salon rooms on the grounds of what at the time I thought of just as a church, but which later I would see as being sort of part of the whole structure of the vakif. The banner of the school associated with the church and the vakif hung behind the table set up in the front of the room. About 50 people were scattered in the audience. In the front, speakers sat at a long table. There was a PowerPoint. Among the issues raised included the discomfort over the total lack of transparency of how many vakifs appointed or elected their administrators. As Laki Vignes, then minority representative to the Ministry of Foundations Board, would point out to me in a later interview, there was a general sense that foundation administration should be by council, but that the minimum number was 3, and some councils had as many as 9. The lack of uniformity was another position that informed the work of the opinion platform. A final crucial issue was that of the representative or democratic aspects of the Vakif administration. The platform noted that there were only about 3 women in all the foundation councils. Thus, the goal of the survey and the subsequent town hall meetings could be seen as a kind of consciousness-raising activist effort to push for reform in the Vakif administration. As the PowerPoint presentation noted, given the huge material support available from the foundations, and given the possible projects that could be organized using the foundations as the organizational starting point, democratic access to and representative status of those foundations was crucial. Notably, the meeting took place on the grounds of a Vakif that was anchored by a church and the accompanying school. Though this was a church, priests and other churchgoers were notably absent. In fact, the only people I recognized in the room were the then editor of Argos and the lawyer who took prominent minority rights cases that I knew from reading the paper. Several of the people who asked questions after the presentation were Turkish Armenians born in Istanbul but who were living abroad. The point of this observation is to highlight 2 things about Vakifs and the debate over their administration. First, there are significant divides over the importance of Vakif reform and indeed over the kinds of politics that can be built around the foundations. This is perhaps unsurprising, and I don't want to suggest that churchgoers were not present because they were somehow inherently conservative. Rather, I want to offer my own inability to conceive of the churches as Vakifs. For many of the deacons, choir members, or just devout men and women I spent time with at the churches, the Vakifs were first and foremost churches. This is not to say that they weren't interested in the proper administration of them, as a number of scandals and the reactions to them made clear. Rather, it was that the function of the Vakif was limited to its primary function, a church, a school, a hospital, or at most a hospital that also contained a chapel. Political action mounted through or over Vakifs was not part of their political repertoire. For the people grouped around the opinion platform, essentially, though, it was a waste of resources to only use Vakifs for their primary function. This relates to the second point I want to highlight about the debate. Vakifs, whether conceived as such or not, are already used in these multiple ways. The opinion platform met in the room above a small room where I would later sip tea with an influential priest. I'd spend much time in that same salon. Similarly, the hospital, by hosting a banquet, or even just as a space where old Armenians sat in the shade and spoke freely in Armenian, was a space with multiple uses. The debate was not over the fact that the Vakif could be used to multiple ends, but rather if they should be the site from which to launch a coordinated political effort for a different way of conceiving of the community. This short ethnographic recap of this meeting suggests some of the issues that arise around this Ottoman institution that remains central to the life of Istanbul Armenians. For some, the Vakif is a site of potential politics that exceeds the religious. For others, their interaction with Vakifs are almost entirely religious in nature. This is one ethnographic example of the ways in which a legal category that originally had no recourse to the question of the division between religion and politics, or between an ethnic or religious orientation, today must answer the question of whether it is to be put to the service of an ethnic or a religious identity. From the perspective of the 20th century nationalist historiography, the Millet system and the institution of the Vakif both seem to conflate ethnicity and religion, politics and religion. The insights of the anthropology of secularism and a conceptual history allow us to take each concept and institution and look at what it did, and see that the question of the priority of religion or ethnicity was simply not posed at the time. However, because today the Republic of Turkey operates from a fundamentally secular perspective, that is, it is entangled in the question of where to draw the line between religion and politics, and because religion has in fact become a salient category for minority differentiation, the continued force of a Millet mentality and the continued importance of the Vakif as an institution means that Armenians in Turkey have the question of differentiating between religion and ethnicity in their political engagement foisted upon them. In closing, I want to reflect briefly on the notion of identity in relation to this forced differentiation between ethnicity and religion. My contention is that while Armenians in Turkey deal with this differentiation in an acute manner because of the legacy of Ottoman categories and institutions, it is a question that plagues all attempts to conceptualize Armenian identity. The concept of identity presupposes that there are certain dominant characteristics that become central to an identity, what it is that makes a person or group identifiable. To ask about identity is to ask for the, or a set of, salient characteristics. We all live today in a world with fundamental secular categories. Following Calouste, the ability to differentiate religion as a category distinct from ethnicity, race, language, or set of practices and institutions is a mark of that basic secular epistemology. In other words, all of us have the differentiation between ethnicity and religion foisted upon us. While Armenians in much of the diaspora do not have Ottoman legal institutions to grapple with, we do have the legacy of Ergüneş. As long as we ask about the salient characteristics of Armenian identity within a secular epistemology, we must all grapple with the differentiation between religion and ethnicity. Though this paper may not provide answers to this impasse, I hope that it has helped to clarify the recurrent, seemingly inevitable force of the question. Thank you very much.